Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so we can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find a tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton. And if you are viewing this via video, you can see that my mom is not here. So I am solo today. Man, what a weird year. What a weird couple of weeks. And today I want to talk about loss. We've been experiencing a lot of loss in the last month especially. And I'm talking about us personally. Mom is not here because her work schedule is absolutely insane. And I talked to her and she said, just go ahead and record without me. It's never the same without Mom. She brings a lot of joy and dialogue to the podcast, so it'll be a little bit awkward for me to record without her. So, Mom, I know you're listening, and you are definitely missed. So yeah, loss. Man, I don't want to make this podcast about me, and that's not what I'm doing here. But I want to talk about this because I think so many of you can relate to loss in your life. Yesterday, I did a funeral service for one of my deacons at church. Very, very, very close friend of ours, close family friend. I've known Bill my entire life. My older brothers hung out with his one son. I hung out with his daughter in high school, and we spent a lot of hours in their home. We were really, really close. I got a phone call the day after Thanksgiving from my deacon's son, who I'm good friends with, and he was on his way to the hospital and said that his dad had fallen over and was unresponsive. Then he called me back shortly after and let me know that he had passed. So anyway, yesterday was the funeral service, and obviously that was really difficult. It's never easy burying close friends. What made it particularly challenging is that just the week before, I buried another one of my very good friends. He was a former boss, just a great, great man, and he had gotten sick with COVID, and was feeling okay. Just felt a little bit sick. He went in to get a test on Monday, tested negative, went to the hospital on Tuesday because he still wasn't feeling well. They did a rapid test and he tested positive. On Wednesday, he was feeling a little bit worse, and they moved him up to ICU. And then Thursday night, he just passed away. It was really, really quick. And that funeral was really difficult for me too, because at the workplace, when I worked for him, they really treated everybody like family. And so their kids were always down at the shop. He owned a trucking business. He sold truck parts and had several trucks. I had driven truck for him for a while. Then I sold truck parts, and his kids were always down at the shop, and we got to know the kids really well. Got really close with both Mark and his wife Sue, and I got the call from her that Mark had passed. So yeah, doing two funerals back to back was challenging. But just a few days before my friend Mark my friend Mark had passed, one of our church members' sons had passed from cancer. He had been battling cancer for over a year now, and in fact, it's one of my brother's former girlfriend's dad who passed away. So we know that family really well. And yesterday, after I did the funeral for my deacon, another one of my deacons contacted me, who's a patron of this podcast. Great friend, one of my very best friends. He texted me last night to say that his father-in-law had passed away yesterday. So, I mean, it is just death after death within our little small community, and I'm certainly feeling the weight of that. I'm really struggling. It's been a super tough 2 weeks with 4 deaths in 2 weeks. It's been a really big challenge, and I was kind of joking about this, yesterday. I was like, what else could go wrong? And I'm always afraid to ask that question because, of course, everything can go wrong. And I think maybe it was just God's way of just sending a little bit of humor, but I'm driving home from the funeral, and my door locks on the car start locking and unlocking. And at first, like, I'm kind of smiling, and I'm like, is this Bill's way of just messing with me after he's gone? And then the car just starts acting erratically. Like the transmission, like I'm going 35 miles an hour, and the transmission just like slams into first gear, then it goes into neutral, then it's like jumping through all these different gears as the door locks are locking and unlocking. The dashboard is just lit up like a Christmas tree, and I didn't think I was going to make it home. I finally made it home, and I had to break the news to my wife, and I'm a mechanic. I grew up working on cars, so I know my way around a car really well. And I get home, and I told Natalie, I was like, so bad news. I'm pretty sure the computer in the car is fried. It's cooked. And, it's an older car. My in-laws graciously gave us that car, so, we were gifted with it. And it's on its last leg. So I just thought that's a pretty big metaphor for what's going on in 2020, where just so much weight is falling on the shoulders of a lot of people. We were notified yesterday by our kids' school that they're extending virtual school through mid-January now. So as I'm recording this in the studio, my kids are upstairs doing virtual school. 3 of my kids are on their school iPads with their teachers, and they're doing virtual school. And last night, my wife just broke down crying, and she said, this is so unfair to the kids, because she has to go into work. I have to work. I just don't have the time to spend all day with my kids, helping them through virtual school. And they're doing okay. But you can certainly feel the weight of loneliness with my kids. I mean, they miss their friends, and this is going on all over the country. There's just so much loss all at once, and I think so many people are having a hard time knowing how to process it all. Between the social isolation, the illness, so many people have lost loved ones this year. Some of that, a lot of that was due to COVID. Some of that was just depression, suicide, other illnesses, cancer. Cancer treatments were pretty much shelved. I know in our community, they just full out stopped cancer treatments, radiation and all that for a couple week period. And then they kind of got back in the swing of things, and I think that's, kind of leveled out now, but those treatments were vital for cancer patients. And you just look around and see how badly people are struggling right now. And I think for us and our family, it's taken quite a while to catch up to us, but we certainly feel the weight of it now. We've been very blessed. We have a very supportive community. I have a supportive church. My family is incredibly supportive. We all are very close to each other. We're very supportive. We call each other, text each other constantly. And of course, the Italian in my family, they're not just little short messages. They're, everybody has to write a book in their text messages. But we stay connected. We stay connected really well, and we have a really good support system. But I got to thinking about this this past week, especially with all of these deaths, that the world of advocacy and the world that survivors live in is constantly peppered with loss. I hate to use this term, but it almost becomes normal. Like you expect for there to be loss in your life. And so I know a lot of you survivors who are listening to this really get it. You understand it. You feel it. I know the messages have not stopped. I get messages every single day. And to those of you who have emailed me and texted me and written me and I've not responded, I do apologize, but I'm just overwhelmed. And that world of loss never stops. It may slow down for a season, but it never stops. So how do we process that? How do we process through that? I think it's so important to remember to take time for yourself. And I'm having to remind myself of this. I've been taking my kids out, and we were playing in the yard yesterday, and anybody who knows me knows that I'm a complete goofball. And I go outside and I jump in the snow, and people are like, yeah, we were waiting for the winter pictures to come. I put a picture up yesterday. I was laying in the snow in just my swimming shorts and nothing else. And, I was doing snow angels in the snow. And, it's just my way of being a goofball and really processing all the heavy stuff that I deal with on a daily basis. And, a bigger part of that, it's not really for myself. I do it just to be a goofball and to bring smiles to people, because it's silly, it's fun, it's funny, it's ridiculous. I was wearing a Santa Claus hat, and I got in our hot tub the other day, and it was our first snowfall, and it was so beautiful. It was gorgeous. The snow was just coming down like crazy. And I put a Santa Claus hat on, and I got in the hot tub, and I had my 7-year-old, I just had him snap a picture, and I put it on Facebook, and I put some cheesy quote about, it was something like, snow is falling, there's a fire in the fireplace, and there's love in my heart. and the comments are hilarious. Some people are saying this sounds like an 80s, like an 80s band lyrics. Other people were asking if I was okay mentally. And it was just kind of a silly way to break the ice, because life can get really heavy, right? There are so many things that are thrown at us constantly. And we have seasons of joy and peace and abundance. But we also have seasons where those things are lacking. And maybe some of you are financially strapped. This year has been crazy with unemployment, people losing their jobs, people being forced to quarantine. My wife's job, they told her if you have to quarantine, you have to take personal days, and then the rest of that time is unpaid. You can't get unemployment, which I think is totally ridiculous. That's a whole nother soapbox. And we will fight that if that comes, because that should be unemployment. When you're ready and available to work and you're told that you cannot work, That's what unemployment's for. But that's a whole nother topic. But there are people out there who've had to quarantine. I know people personally who've had to quarantine back to back, these 14 days at a time. And some people have had to quarantine 3 times in a row because they supposedly had exposure, 15 times removed or whatever. And I think it's so challenging for people financially. It's challenging for people socially when you're isolated from people. It's challenging for people on so many different levels. And I think about all these kids, millions of kids right now, who are learning virtually. And, and I almost cried before I started recording. I was upstairs. I was checking on my 5-year-old son, and he's in kindergarten. And I just thought, how sad is it that he's learning through an iPad? And it's total chaos. At 5 years old, anytime his teacher unmutes the students, it's just total chaos. And kids are talking over top each other. My son's trying to tell stories about things that he did outside and when he's playing, and nobody can hear because everybody's talking at the same time. And my son likes to put up pictures of everybody. He expands the screen so that he can see thumbnails of each of the kids in the class. And I looked, and one girl, she was almost crying, and one of his classmates was holding her ears, and she was just shaking her head because it was total chaos. And I thought that this is the environment that our kids are trying to learn in. And it's just unfair. There's so much that's unfair about this. But anyway, it's not about me or my kids. They're going to be fine. My wife and I work with them a lot, and they're very intelligent. They're going to do fine. But my heart breaks for the kids who their parents work full time and they can't sit with their kids, or they don't have access to internet, or they have poor access to internet. We live in a very rural community, and internet access it is absent for, I think, something like 20% of the families in our school district. They don't even have access to internet at all. And I thought, how challenging for parents who are forced to have their kids learn online and they don't even have internet access. And that's just one more challenge that these parents have to figure out. It's another hurdle. It's another obstacle to life. And I know my wife and I, we're exhausted from this virtual school, and we have the best case scenario. I have an awesome church that my elders told me, they were like, go home, work from home. Don't even think about coming up to the church building. We'll see you on Sundays. That is absolutely 100% best case scenario. And that's an act of grace. They're incredibly kind. They're gracious. They're understanding. But a lot of people have jobs where they're not afforded that opportunity. They're not afforded the chance to work from home. And when you have both parents who are working, or you have single parents who have to go to work and they have to leave their kids, they have to struggle their way through it. And I'm just trying to wrap my mind around it. I know I'm just talking out loud. I'm just thinking out loud today. And it just weighs on me. It really weighs on my heart, because I know of families who have told me personally, my kids are all at home right now doing virtual school. Parents are leaving kids at home because they don't have a choice. They can't find sitters, or they can't afford sitters, and they still have to go to work. So it's just this, it's loss on top of loss on top of loss on top of loss. And the one thing that a lot of people aren't talking about is the isolation factor, and the mental health, and the depression, and the suicide rates that are just soaring right now. Not many people are talking about that, and you hear, oh, it's all about the mask, 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 mask. And if I hear one more person talk about these stupid masks, and I'm not an anti-masker, I'm not. I wear a mask when I go places. I wore one at the funeral yesterday. I wear a mask. I am not an anti-masker, but I'm sick of hearing about these stupid masks, as if that's the most important thing in life right now. I get the mask. I get it. Whatever. You got to put it on when you go to stores. I put it on when I go to Lowe's or when I go to Walmart. Whatever. It's not a big deal to me, one way or the other. But why aren't people talking about depression? Why aren't people saying, if you really love your neighbor, you'll check on them? And you'll just call them or text them or make sure that their kids are okay. Make sure that your neighbors that don't have internet have access to internet. If you have internet at your house and you know of somebody who doesn't have internet, open up your home. Those are the things that people need to be talking about. And I'm not hearing it, even among advocates. And I'm not picking on advocates. And in all fairness, I've not been on social media much either. I've been avoiding it because I just can't take it. It doesn't help me process all that I'm going through right now. It is really, really tiresome to hear all the pettiness on social media. And that's part of why I post silly pictures of myself and, just to lighten the mood. And I know some of you can probably relate to this. I miss the days of seeing pictures of little kittens on Facebook. Like, social media started out as people just posting silly, goofy stuff. And it was just a way to stay connected. And it's just turned into this monstrosity of opinionated, supercharged posts where everybody has to post what they think is relevant and what's on their mind, and then get into arguments. And I don't have the energy for it. And I've almost deactivated my Facebook and Twitter accounts multiple times over the last couple months. And I'm going to keep them up. I mean, I'll keep them up, but I've been absent from social media, and that's been intentional. I just backed away from it. So what do we do about it? What do we do about all the loss? Certainly we can't stop loss from taking place. People are still going to die. People are going to get sick. People are going to get into accidents. People are still going to be abused. Loss is going to happen. We're not going to stop loss from happening. We can minimize it, certainly. We can minimize risk, but loss will always happen. It's always going to be there. Death is always going to take place. At some point, we're going to die. So what do we do? What do we do when loss is coming at us at 100 miles an hour? Take time for yourself. Take time to unplug from social media. Take time to just sit in silence. That's one of my favorite things to do. It's just shut the phone off, shut the computer off, just sit and think. And of course, I love the outdoors. This year, we were gifted another blessing with our hot tub. I love that thing. But we have a close friend who was upgrading his hot tub. So this one's, it's old. I mean, it's a 14-year-old tub, almost 15 years old. But he gave it to us, and we were super excited because I certainly can't afford to buy a hot tub. And I use it every single day and sometimes multiple times a day. Yesterday I was in it twice, and I went out last night and I just sat for about half an hour in complete silence. And I just looked out at the snow and, just letting my brain pause for a moment. And that might not work for some of you. Some of you may not like silence. Some of you may despise silence. And so if music is what calms you, do that. Sitting around is kind of my jam. I don't know how I'm so skinny still because I love to relax. I don't like to exercise a whole lot. But some of you do. Some of you, that's what works for you. So take time for yourself. Go out and go running. Go exercise. Go to the gym. Do whatever works for you. Find that and do it. The other thing too is I have to remember my kids are also processing a lot of grief. These deaths, they were close to them. Bill Riggs, my deacon who died, that we just did his funeral. I just did his funeral yesterday. He took myself, him and his wife took myself and my daughter. She was 8 years old. They're the ones that we went to Haiti with. Some of you saw that my daughter, Eden, did this project to drill a well in Haiti. That's because of Bill's influence. Bill took us to Haiti. We all went together to visit my sister and her husband. And Bill was really into wells. Bill drilled so many wells around the world. Just an incredible man. Very giving, and water was very important for him. To give access to clean water, that was his big thing. That's what he wanted to provide, and he did it. And so that inspired my daughter. So, his loss is not just mine and Natalie's loss, it's my kids' loss too. And so we have to help them process trauma. And the best way that we can do that is to make life feel normal for them. So my 5-year-old just came down and interrupted. So, that part got edited out, but he came downstairs and, he said, class is done. And I said, okay. So I'm going to go up in a little bit and talk to him and just kind of hang out and, do what I can do to just make life feel normal. And so I think that's probably the best thing we can do. We can normalize life in the midst of trauma. And I know for me, that just helps me process a little bit better. Because we can get caught in these cycles where we just focus on the trauma and we just sink into a really deep depression. And the reality is, even in the midst of loss, there's so much gain that's happening too. There's so many good things going on. There's so many blessings. And sometimes you forget about that. If you don't take time to intentionally stop and kind of detach yourself from the weight of all the loss, and just do things that are normal, sometimes you forget that there are so many blessings out there. And so you got to be intentional about that, and you got to really think about those things and lean into them and help bless other people. And that's kind of our thing. I just talked to my kids this morning right before school, and I said, on your off times during virtual school, we have to find ways to bless other people. We've got to think of other people that we can help out, that we can bless, that we can call. And so I'm just encouraging them to really reach out to other people and be intentional about that. And they're excited about that. They always like doing things for other people. They're rock star kids. They really are. But just remember, this loss, this season of loss, if you're kind of in the same boat as us, where you've had multiple deaths back to back, or you've had multiple illnesses, or whatever it is, financial losses, whatever it is. If you're in that season right now, just remember, 1, you're not alone. 2, it will pass eventually. It will slow down. You'll come out of that season of loss for a time. And so keep your head above water. Just remember that there are blessings out there, and sometimes you have to really search for them, because the weight of the loss just keeps us blinded from those things. So be intentional about looking for blessings. And finally, I would say, if I was going to leave you with the truth bomb, I would say find somebody to bless, whatever that looks like. If that's a phone call, great. If somebody's hungry and they need a meal, drop it off at their doorstep. If somebody's just had a bad day and you know about it, do something to make them smile. Find a way to bless somebody, and I promise it'll help you work through your loss. There are brighter days ahead, I promise. Well, thank you for tuning in to this episode, and next week, my dearest mother should be among us. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next episode.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. Thank you to our patrons who make the podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker and search for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron, and check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.